We're going to record. Okay. Let's get the view. I don't know how the recording does the view, but hopefully the speaker. Okay. Shalom, Rabbi Shalom Schwartz. Shalom, and I, Shalom and I, have been working together for about 8 years now, I think. 8 years, and about 8 years prior to that. 8 years prior to that, I think. You started the project Aseret, which then turned into the Aseret movement, and it's my honor to really have a discussion with you, and I want to ask you a few questions, and really our conversation should go where it goes. Okay, I entitled this Realization Since October 7th. Realization since October 7th. It's been, tomorrow will be a year, secular year, 365 days. I think there might be two realizations about what happened. One was like immediate, or were there immediate realizations? And then as this year's developed, as this year's gone by, things developed, things changed. So I guess my question to you would be, what were your immediate realizations? And then looking back over the year, what realizations have you had from the year?
Well, let's start with a commentary on your introduction. I think that the nature of realization is such that, we get insights. Sometimes insights stay with us, sometimes they build, sometimes they stay in our unconscious mind or in our soul's resources, and they, from time to time, we draw from them. The word realization, I always think about the introduction to the Mesilat Yesharim, which Rabbi Weinberg, when he would teach that, he would speak that the person's major obligation in this world is to clarify and to realize his purpose in this world. What are we here for? And if anything, I would say that this process of the last year, if we look at it from a global perspective, a Jewish perspective, a God perspective, if you will, there's a process of increased realizations that we have individually, collectively, and globally that are part of the evolution of the destiny of the world, the purpose of the world. And I think that's one of the major realizations that I had pretty much, pardon me, at the beginning, that this was a very big, big event. This wasn't just another breakout of a war. I think I'm not alone in that regard, but I'm saying that the basic realization of this is bigger than one can digest in a moment. This is a global event. This is something that is here to, in the words of the Rambam, when things happen, we're supposed to pay attention to them as God speaking to us. And our response to a world that has a God supervised history or destiny, unfolding of destiny according to some God-given purpose to all of the creation, one asks at every given point, what am I supposed to learn from this? What is a wake-up call happening here? And what is the nature of that wake-up call? What's the meaning of that wake-up call? What's my response to that wake-up call? And so the first dimension of realization is a wake-up call is not something that you tap the nudnik. They call it nudnik here. What do they call it in English? The
Simple.
The sleep button. Ring again in 5 minutes.
The snooze button.
The snooze button, right. So this is not about tapping the snooze button. There's wake-up calls that are gentle, and then there's wake-up calls that are very dramatic and impactful and demand, for anyone that believes in God and believes in God's role in history, what is this about? What's the meaning of this? Not as a passive participant in history, but as an active participant in history, particularly as the Jewish people, an event of this magnitude, the horrific tragedy and massacre that took place on October 7th, demanded that we ask ourselves, what is this? What's the meaning of this? What are we supposed to learn from this? What are we awakened to as a result of this tragic massacre, horrific events of October 7th and after? So that's the first stage of realization. Realization is not, okay, yeah, you read a newspaper, these are interesting events. Maybe there's something I'm supposed to learn. Maybe there's not something I'm supposed to learn. That's the way I think most of us deal with the unfolding of events, especially if we're not right in the center of them. But if you look at this event and you believe that God speaks to us through the events of history, one cannot shut that message down. And it becomes a very powerful drisha in Hebrew, we say, like it's a demand. It's demanding of my attention. It's not an easy thing to answer. It's not a one-time, oh, that's what it means. No, it's a call to respond. It's a call to change. We're in these 10 days of return, of tshuva, 10 days of change. This is a call to change the way personally we're going, the Jewish people are going, Israel is going, world Jewry is going, the world is going. This is a dramatic call to wake up to something. That's a realization. Whether you get the exact realization, exact message that the Almighty or that history is teaching you at that moment is a matter of perspective. You could say, I got it, you got it, he got it. We're collectively getting it. We're supposed to get maybe different messages, and there's a collective consciousness message that we need to come together to realize. But that to me is the first ABCs of this discussion. Is there something we're supposed to realize that represents a dramatic change? And that's why the wake-up call was necessary, or the wake-up call is demanding of us to wake up to something. So again, you might say that's just an introduction, but that's, to me, the most important first step. You can't get very far without that, because the tendency of a human being to go back to what we call in Hebrew shigra, to go back to normalcy, to go back to, what's the word, routine, it's overwhelming. And we need that. We need to have routine in order to function. But routine has the side effect of nothing's changed. And if nothing's changed, then that wake-up call is unfortunately gone unheard. And as the Rambam says in the first chapter in Hilchot Ta'anit, when he discusses this, he says that he quotes the Torah that says, if the Almighty is trying to get our attention through the events of history, and we don't pay attention, and it's coming in the form of tzarot, in the form of pain and suffering, then unfortunately the pain and suffering may get worse in order to get more of our attention. It's in the Torah itself. If you consider it mikra, if you consider it happenstance, if it's just coincidence, okay, we're just operating according to the way things are, then God's involvement in history to get our attention increases in volume, increases in intensity, and unfortunately increases in pain until we stop going business as usual and we say we need to wake up to something here. Now, obviously, living in Israel and going through this past year, none of us returned normal to normalcy. My son was in the army for weeks at a time and back and forth, and my nephew and I went to funerals and I went to shiva houses, and everybody's lives were disrupted. And so the desire to actually get back to normalcy is perfectly understandable and necessary, but it needs to be in the context of things are different. What is different? How am I different as a result of these events? And so that to me is the first realization that happened then. And to some extent, the last weeks, even last, we don't know what's going to happen even tonight. But as we see the intensity and the escalation of the fight, of the wars that we're witnessing increasing, it seems very much that question still begs to be answered.
Wow. Okay. Thought it was such a
I
simple.
want that to sink in before I go on to another realization. You can ask about that. We can talk a little bit about that, but I want to stress that I think that it's not an easy thing for anybody, and it's certainly not something that one wants to be doing, right? We want to be living our lives in a way that we can predict them. We're not being woken up. We're woken up. You have the woke movement today. We're not talking about the woke movement per se. But we're woken up. Everybody's got their lives. They need to live their lives. What do you mean you're waking me up? What do I need to be woken up to? I have my life. I have my business. I have my family. I have my situation. Life is what it is. Some's good. Some's less good. But an event like this in the history of the Jewish people, as a people that has a history that's in a relationship with God, we have to ask ourselves, what is the meaning of this event for us individually, collectively, and ultimately for the world? So that to me is not, I try to remind myself of that every day. I mean, one way to do it, of course, is just to think of the pain of the families of the hostages, and the hostages, their lives are certainly not back to normal in any way, shape, or form. The still hundred of the ones that were there and are still traumatized by it, the families that lost their loved ones, the soldiers that died, the thousands of lost lives, the tens of thousands of displaced families. Still today, we have a father and a daughter living with us now from Haifa. That the daughter couldn't handle all the trauma of the missiles. They're looking for a place. We know cousins of theirs. They moved in here a week and a half ago. You can't. All of us want to live normal lives. Nothing wrong with that. But if we're taking our lives seriously, the Jews are supposed to be more than normal, and this world as it's going now is not the ideal, and we have responsibility for that. So that's the next kind of realization is this is not just about me, it's not just about my family, it's not just about Israel, it's certainly about the Jews around the world. I'm getting emails from my friends and family all the time about transformative experiences that they're having vis-a-vis their own Jewish identity and anti-Semitism in places like Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa, and Los Angeles, and New York, and everywhere. And so certainly it's about the Jewish people, and it's about our being a part of this nation called Israel, but it's also about the world. It's also about the choices that every nation and every individual is making at this time. So that's, I guess, in some way, the second realization is it's big enough that it involves thinking about the implications of this war on the future of humanity and how that plays itself out and what my role is and what my responsibility is to that.
Wow. Okay. You said, if I'm hearing you correctly, that you know, realizing that there's a realization to be had is the first point here, and what that is not easy. How do you how do you go about working through that? Like I feel that. I feel the world's definitely changed. I also I think on October the 7th, when when I got to see all the news and everything, realize this is a history changing event. History changed. Um, and I love the way that you're saying that, it's if you're responsible, so then you realize that your responsibility has changed. You're not a passive observer. No, let's see what happens to the Middle East. No, I'm a Jew. Like this is happening to me. How do you go about? How do we go about thinking through what the change, what change is being asked for? What change is being asked for me? What change being, as you say, for the Jewish people, for the world? How would you guide us through that?
I'm not sure I'm up to guiding anyone through it. I could share a little bit my own process. I think that you're getting back a little bit to the Mesilat Yesharim. We said it's Yitbarer v'Yitamet. The Hebrew word for realization is lihitamet. That's one of the ways of translating that word, which means to make true to yourself. It's a reflexive word for the word emet, to make true, to realize. In Hebrew, the word emet actually means more to be real than it does to mean truth. It means truth, but it means to be reality, truth in the sense of what is real and what's not real. Truth and falsehood is one way of viewing the dynamic of emet v'sheker. Another is what's real and what's illusion. And so in that regard, I think that there are things that we know, yitbarer, we have a certain clarity about them, but when an event happens, there's a realization that takes place on another level, where the emotional dimension of that clarity is possible in another way and another depth. So, for example, I actually made a film many years ago when I was taking a workshop on making social activism films. It was to support Israel many years ago, and I made a film called trying to remember the title, something like "I Trust Hamas." And the film basically went like this: I trust Hamas. They say what they mean what they say, and they live with what they mean. I trust them. When they say in their charter that they want to destroy the state of Israel, I trust them. That film didn't get a lot of mileage then. It got taken down by YouTube, actually, even then, because it was obviously inciting people to think that Hamas wants to destroy the Jewish state. So what I'm pointing out, though, is when October 7th happened, most people, not everyone, people, but most people, and you find this in Israel certainly, and around the world, that we're saying, okay, this is about land. If you give the Palestinians a state, they're not going to want to destroy the Jewish state, even though they say that they do. No, but they don't really mean that. They mean that they're so angry because they feel you took away their state. And so when you think about a political solution for the situation, you think that people are like me and they want, all people want good for their family. They want quiet. So why should I believe that they really want a war to wipe us out? And they really believe that they want to destroy as many Jews as possible and kill us all. And why would I believe that? That's not human nature. So October 7th challenged that, well, call now an illusion. It exploded that illusion. And it became explicit again. We want to destroy all of you. We're willing to take every Jew, and they've been saying this since for many years, throw you into the sea. We're willing to rape your women. We'll throw your children into ovens. We'll murder and slaughter you, as many as we can. That's what we want to do. So the realization of this, that at least in the Hamas's case, for the first, for those first 24 hours, it's just Hamas, then, okay, well, I guess it's not about a political solution. We're facing people that are actually living with this notion of, in every generation, as we say in the Agadah, they get up, they get up to destroy us, to annihilate us. Yes, there are people that want to annihilate the Jewish people. That's a realization. That's not just a knowledge. It's not like a line in the Agadah anymore. It's a realization that demands of me to look at reality differently. And I'm looking at these people now, not wanting to have a political solution. Everybody knows that the people that were kindest to them, the people in the Otef Aza, the Gaza, next to the Gaza Strip, the communities there, the kibbutzim, they helped their children, they helped them out, they brought them frozen presents. They were the most peace-loving Israelis and engaging these Palestinians with open hearts and open souls to seek peace. And those are the people they murdered, and those are the people that they slaughtered and raped. So that staring at that in the face required me to say, okay, you got my attention. This is something different. I need to accept I'm living in a reality now that these people are living with that commitment to destroy my country, destroy my children, my wife, all my family, every one of the Jewish people in Israel. They want to destroy us and throw us into the sea or get rid of us or in the most horrific and horrendous ways. Okay. Then October 8th happens. And there's an explosion of support for that around the world. That's a new level of realization. I never made a film about, those people wanting to destroy the Jewish people. I grew up amongst them in Toronto. They're friendly. We never had that perception. But obviously, if there's an explosion of anti-Semitism on October 8th, it didn't come out of nowhere. Underneath it, there was some anti-Semitism waiting to explode. And it found its expression in support of Hamas and in support of calling Israel a genocidal nation. After a couple of days of Israel retaliating, we're now being branded a genocidal nation. And every country in the world is declaring that Israel should stop and should be ostracized, and the UN and the courts, the international courts, all of these expressions of anti-Israel, anti-Zionism that were obviously not just about, again, Israel or Zionism or political situation, but about hatred for Jews. Again, I have to ask myself, what does that mean to me? What do I do with that? The situation's not as normal. Something's very, very different. So I'm saying that you're asking, how do you guide yourself? The first thing is to take those things that you believe to be true. I believe there's anti-Semitism, but I am not realizing it. I have to emotionally realize the extent of what I'm talking about. If the UN year after year has been passing all these resolutions to ostracize Israel and to handcuff in every war that we've been not to finish, not to defend us, and every time Israel stands up in defense of its country, we're attacked in the UN and we're held back by our so-called allies even. So I have to realize that that's saying something. That's not just something to sweep under the carpet and say, okay, that's the way things are. Realization of truths that we know allow us to now bring into a different level of understanding. And what's the word I'm looking for? When you act on something, you need both your mind and your heart and your actions. So once the mind and the heart are aligned with the realization, you can begin to think about, well, what do you do about that? So I think that's the first step, is to realize that this is not something that gets processed by just reading an article. You have to contemplate it. You have to understand it. You have to look at what your beliefs are and say which ones are being challenged. I thought that American Jews could live forever without any anti-Semitism. That's being challenged. Do I want to look at that? Do I want to understand it? Am I prepared to deal with its implications? So it's taking givens that we have, those that are now being upended, being prepared to change our view of things. And in addition, the willingness to actually emotionally engage that new realization. And once that happens, you can say, okay, now what should I do about that? If Jews actually are in a situation where they feel that it's unsafe to live where they're living, whether it's France or Toronto or other places in the world. I hear there's a place called the United States that some people might feel increasingly unsettled in. What does that imply? What should I do? Do I just want to run away? Do I stand up? Do I fight it? Do I uncover the lies that it's based on? All of the above. Does it mean I should consider coming home to Israel? Why? Why not? Address the questions. Don't shy away from any question. When we're being woken up to a new reality, we have to check our old reality and say, what are my assumptions about the reality that I was in, and what's this waking me up to that I need to rethink my values, my commitments, my priorities, my destiny, my responsibilities, both intellectually and emotionally, and ultimately in action.
Okay. Well, I want to add something to our conversation now. And, you'll tell me if it works or it doesn't. I don't know if we'll be able to do it. I don't know if you'll be able to do it. If together we can do it. Many years ago, I think actually Risa Feinstein gave us the idea of it, that, the Ten Commandments are our lenses, right? We can look at the world, we can process the world through what the Aseret Dibrot, through the Ten Commandments. That's our national identity, national way of looking at things. This is the covenant that we got on Sinai with God. That's who the Jewish people are. Obviously, not all Jews live that way, but I know that's our belief, and maybe you'll correct me. You'll say it differently. But let's put on those glasses. I want to ask you to put on those glasses, and think about what you've been saying now about this new reality, and how do they guide us? How do they tell us how to look at it, what to do, maybe what to feel?
Okay, I think it's a very powerful model. The first things that comes to mind is really the first of the Aseret Dibrot, the first of the Ten Commandments, of course, is God introducing himself to the Jewish people. I am God that took you out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. I've given you freedom. You were oppressed. You were lost as slaves. You were a whole nation completely enslaved. And I got you out of there. And I took you out, brought you to Mount Sinai, took you to the land of Israel. We have a relationship. We have a destiny. So there's an interesting question that there's a book called the Sefer Mitzvot HaKatan, small book of mitzvot. He asked the question as follows. He said, Jews are expected to be optimistic. And we have a great optimism, the Jewish people. We use all sorts of things to keep ourselves optimistic: humor, prayer, learning. But one of the key aspects of that is we actually believe that the world is heading towards a fulfillment, an ultimate fulfillment. Right? We call it in Hebrew tzipit Yeshua. Did you expect that the world was going to reach redemption? Did you live with that sense of expectation that the world is not heading to destruction, but actually to redemption? And each individual is supposed to say, yeah, of course, I have that inside myself. And he explains that comes from this first of the Ten Commandments. If God took us out of Egypt, a place of tremendous despair and tremendous no future, and he took us out of that and gave us our ultimate ability to be an independent nation with an independent purpose, so he can take us out of any situation. And in the deepest pogroms and the Holocaust, Jews carried a sense of hope and of mission that we're going to get beyond this particular tragedy, and we're going to come out stronger and better and further along the path towards our destiny. So that, number one, when we look at this situation, it's easy. It's not easy. I asked around my Shoshana table for my children and grandchildren, my wife, to look back and say, what during this year, I forget exactly how I phrased it now, but it was about when was a moment that you felt Hashem's presence in your life during this year? Most, not most, but when was a moment? So everybody had a little different angle. My grandchildren immediately said the night the Iranians sent, this was just after we had been in the bomb shelters on Wednesday night, and 3 months in April, when we were also in the, hundreds of Iranian ballistic missiles being fired at Israel. And we came out. Unfortunately, there were, but basically miraculously coming out relatively unscathed from a massive, I don't know if you've ever seen a ballistic missile. They're like really, really big missiles that can do massive damage. Any one of them could have created a huge hundreds of casualties. and deaths. And here we came out with a miraculous, God protected, God protected. God, together with the technology that the IDF developed and our allies and everybody that used the technology that we have to protect us, and a few that got through, but God figured out how to not to have the casualties. But the combination of trusting God and taking responsibility to defend ourselves, which is the Jewish way. It's not either or. It's not the IDF is only going to protect us. It's not just God protects us if we're passive, but together with us taking responsibility together in our partnership with God to defend ourselves and to attack our enemies, we're feeling empowered by God's presence in our life. So the first Diber, it's a lens to view all these events through. These are not just military exercises. These are things that we do together with God. We blow the shofar going into battle. You see the pictures of those who are aware of this. Our soldiers, many of our soldiers come from religious backgrounds, and they go in with that confidence. When I speak to my son after he came out of his first tour of duty in Gaza, he said the feeling that they had of presence of God and what they were doing was enormous, was so powerful. And they were close calls. He thought he was going to die in one of the incidents. And he talked about it. And that's the first Diber. That's the first of the 10 Commandments. We live with God. We live with the awareness that God is here. This does protect us. He took us out of Egypt. He's taken us this far in history. We survived the Holocaust. Not that everybody individually did, and not the Jewish people didn't massively suffer and get weakened by every tragedy we've gone through, including this. But we know that this is not, we're not doing it alone. So that's one dimension. The other thing do you want me to go on or you want to stop on that?
No, I love it. I love it. I have this thing which I'm going to send out called the Seret alignment test, where you you think about for Yom Kippur, something to take into Yom Kippur, and I've divided up the 10 Commandments into our relationship between us and God, us and ourselves, and us and between yourself and other people. And this morning, in our Sunday morning group, we were discussing this table, and the question. I think I can find it. The question I have, okay, I can't minimize here. I don't know where I put it, but the question was something like, how aware of you of God's presence constantly? I'm the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, and you and God, you're in your relationship to God. Like, how aware of you of we discussed that as a very interesting question. We actually changed it. We changed it to when are you aware of God? When with the introduction there says the things that you're good at, strengthen. How can you strengthen that? So yeah, I think we all. That's a great question. When over the last year did we really feel the hand of God? And I think that's part of the contemplation of how do we increase that? How do we, amazing listening, hearing about the soldiers, and I can imagine, that's something we're not privileged to feel that.
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's so much testimony that you can tap into, and so much you can find out about anybody in the world today. We can, that is part of the. I'll just talk about that for a second. The thing I actually said at the table was, I felt God's presence so deeply at a couple of funerals of soldiers where their mothers spoke, and the mother's connection to God was so deep. And so in their tears and in their pain and in their understanding of the Kiddush Hashem that their sons had done, and they were able to communicate that from a place of total presence in God. It was so powerful. And those you can listen to those, you can watch those if you get on the right the websites and news. You can see that you can touch that
Hmm.
kedusha, that holiness that comes when the pain is so deep, and you dig deep into yourself and your soul, and you connect to God's presence. There's something very, very awesome about that. So I want to use that to say that every soldier that is fighting for the Jewish people is doing many things, but one is the on the basic level, when we stop murder, right? The commandment "don't murder" doesn't just mean you personally don't murder. It means stop murderers. In Hebrew, it's called "lo ta'amod al dam re'echa." You're not allowed to stand by idly when your brother's blood is being spilled. So every soldier and every person that's supporting the soldiers and every person that is defending Israel and giving us the confidence and the weapons and what we need to defend ourselves is doing that sixth commandment of stopping murder. And these murderers need to be stopped. So there's an urgent and critical need to fulfill the sixth commandment by stopping terrorists, stopping murderers, stopping, and all that supports that, which means stopping the lies, which is the ninth commandment. Don't don't testify falsely against your brother. Don't allow these lies to be gone without, to be said without being challenged. That is another one of the Ten Commandments. When we hear a lie about Israel, we think, "Oh, there's the media again. What are you going to do?" No, that's a core value. That's violating essential principle of humanity. You don't lie, and lies are used to support murder. They're used to support brainwashing people into feeling that they can destroy every Jew. You have to challenge it. You have to speak truth. You have to uncover the lies. In the name of the Ten Commandments, in the sacred morality that we're given at Mount Sinai, we were given the responsibility to stand for life and defeat a murderous terrorist regime, to stand up for truth and uncover and destroy the lies that are being used to promote that murder and to alienate the Jewish people from each other and from ourselves and from the world. So it's when you put the lens of Ten Commandments onto these events that are unfolding, everywhere you look, you see another opportunity to stand up for the moral truths that we've been entrusted with.
Wow. Actually, recently I saw the Vilna Gaon says that the Ten Commandments are said in the singular. Lo titzach is speaking to an individual. In Hebrew, if you're speaking to a group, you say lo titzachu. So why? But we know that God was speaking to the everyone. So why didn't He use the plural? So he says because God was speaking to the klal. He was speaking to everyone as one, together, as a unit. And if that's true, that's an amazing way to read it, because then you have to reread it. And then lo titzach means you as a people, you as a whole nation will not have any murder. No murder. Not yet. I think it's exactly what you're saying. That's the vision for Israel. That's the vision, right? What we're doing. You're right. Those soldiers, when they come under such false criticism, and yet they are, doing an unbelievable mitzvah. Upholding. Yeah. Wow. I had some thoughts about the second one. I want to go back. Can we go back to that?
You're the moderator. You can go wherever you want.
Okay. Okay. Go. Let's go back to do not have any other gods.
What do you want to say about that?
Um, I think where you've got me to today is, thinking through what we need to do, being very cautious about, grabbing onto to other gods, grabbing onto, solutions which might detract us from what is being asked of us. And keeping a focus, keeping very focused as to, there's a calling here. You've given us some tools about how to process that calling, and really being focused on that. Yeah, we need to do everything. We need as much political alliance and help from other nations and peoples and whoever can help us, and we need, all sorts of things. But they can become our false gods. The God is what provides. So okay, that's going to provide our security and the solution to the problem. So it's to me that it's a warning. No, don't go there. Don't use those things, but never substitute them for what really God wants from us.
If I can just add a little bit to that, I think there's the tendency of all of us, and it's a little bit part of the division in Israel and maybe everywhere, that we tend to view things through this dichotomous view of the world, right? Okay, God runs the world. What do I have to do with, he's running the world. I just have to pray, and I have to, make sure I remember him, and okay, but he's running the world. And there's those say, whoa, 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 whoa. It's like, I saw this religious general who was in an interview on Israeli television. He said, look, you want to go there? Don't talk to me. Like, I'm a general. Okay, let's talk about the army. God, yeah, that's you want to talk about God? Go to shul. So he said, and his view was, even though he was wearing a kippah, he's saying, like, this is all about IDF strategy. It's all about allies. We have to work in the world of as if there's no God, and take full responsibility. And I think that my own view of that is that this is playing into our desire to be an either or kind of universe. And in fact, the classic quote about what you referred to is when a person sees himself as kind of almighty in Sefer Dvarim, it says, "Koch v'otzem yadi, kochi v'otzem yadi, asali et hachayal hazeh." My strength is what did this accomplishment. I accomplished this with my own hands. And people say that's ego. Where's God in that? And the interesting thing is that the end of the verse actually says that God gave me this chayal. It says, I forget exactly the verse, but it's the end that you should know. Shashem asali et chayal hazeh. God gave me this accomplishment. So which is it?
He gives you the
Koach lasot chayal. He gave you the strength.
He gave you the power.
Accomplishment. Right. So this ability to see these two things simultaneously is not common. It requires a certain expansive consciousness that embraces both of these dimensions simultaneously. On the one hand, we've been given responsibility, and we have koach, and we have technology, and we have an IDF, and we need to be completely committed to be as excellent and as powerful as possible in that realm. And that's not a distraction from God. That's what God gave us these abilities to do. But that doesn't mean that I forget God when I'm doing that. It means that I require to bring those two dimensions of understanding of reality together. I'm in a relationship with God with my power. And my power is actually a God-given power to maintain that relationship, because I'm a partner in creation. I'm a partner in this fulfillment of the destiny that we've been entrusted with, both as human beings and especially as Jews. So I think that that's one of the challenges of the second commandment, but it goes together with the first, right? We know that they're two sides of the same coin. I hold on to my belief in God. I don't fall into the trap of seeing anything else as having independent power, but I actually embrace it as having given God-given powers that I've been given. And if I get that properly, if I get that, you can call it a balance, I call it more of a synergy, because there's a synergy that happens at that moment when you're actually engaged in both with an understanding of their relationship to each other. There's a power that happens. There's actually a holiness that happens because you imbue in your powers a God-given dimension, a God-given awareness. And so in every aspect of this war, you have both of these things operative. And I don't know how it's not something that's completely explainable in logical terms. You have to kind of like engage them and then they come together. We know that when our children, we're trying to teach our children anything, right? You're trying to teach your child something. There's a part of you that like to just, get it already. So you have this desire to kind of force it into your child, and you know that that doesn't work. So you soften up and you kind of like smile and you create a space for the child to be themselves. As soon as they feel their own power, then they can accept what you're saying. It's the relationship between power and receiving. God's giving us, we have to receive, and that's where we gain our power from, in that relationship.
Wow. Tell you what it makes me think about going back to the Vilna Gaon, when he says that the Shema corresponds to the Ten Commandments. So Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem is our God, is the first commandment. Hashem Echad, God is one, refers to the second commandment of do not have any other gods. And that's one. Finding that, as you said, synergy, that oneness, that being one with God, doesn't mean at all that you are passive, and it doesn't mean that but you take your gifts and you use them in the world as God would have you use them, with this realization of like a flow. Yeah, harder done than said, but I think that's where I'm hearing you going with that.
I'll just add, when I was thinking about your question of realizations I had in the course of this year, I'll add one that, again, it's an ongoing challenge. As we know, for the year leading up to October 7th in Israel, there's tremendous division in the country. It's around, however you want to interpret the division, but the division was fierce and severe and terribly disturbing, and to the point where people were talking about civil war, and people were saying to each other, you're not my brother. As someone pointed out, the only people you say you're not my brother to is your brother. So the experience of October 7th, which completely shifted that entire dynamic, at least temporarily, at least for a short respite, the massive uncovering, and I like to use the word uncovering, of the inherent unity and connection and brotherhood that Am Yisrael feels with each other, both certainly in Israel, and the soldiers from the religious and the non-religious that fought together and felt their connection and their commitment to each other. That unity is tangible, and it destroyed the illusion, at least momentarily, of us taking seriously this separation and disunity. Now, what happened? Within months, it started dissipating, and the political rivalries and the media and everything's feeding all the divisions again. What I wanted to say about my own realization is when people tell you, I'm not your brother, how seriously do you take them? So I've had fights with my brothers. I know the whole Torah is filled with a lot of brotherly rivalry, right? But the end of Sefer Bereshit ends with Yosef reconciling with his brothers. And the final story of Am Yisrael is the reconciliation of the divisions amongst our people. And we need that so desperately. We need that to realize that we have yachad, we have that togetherness with every single Jew in the world, and that gives us a demonstration that we have for humanity. Ultimately, we believe in the brotherhood of all men. And we live with that recognition that we as one people have to bring that connection and loyalty and commitment to each other as an expression of our mission, not just as, hey, it's good to have unity, don't fight with people. No, it's actually a necessary prerequisite for fulfillment of our mission, our oneness, our togetherness, our unity. Unity never should be mistaken to mean uniformity, right? We're not all the same. On the contrary, it's the differences that allow for the harmony of the differences to be shown. there's a harmonious symphony that's supposed to be played by the Jewish people, not some where everybody wears the same. It's not uniformity. That's part of the mistake. You're not like me. I can't get along with you. No, you're not like me. I need to learn from you. You're different from me. Wow, we have a huge differences. Let's figure out how we can harmonize our differences and not just get along, but see the synergy of the different parts of what we bring to the puzzle. And that to me was a realization also that happened this year on a level of great significance, because you saw people who were fighting last Yom Kippur, God forbid it shouldn't happen this year, the streets of Tel Aviv, they were fighting about Tfilah, B'tzibur, the davening in Yom Kippur, and they were fighting together the next week. 2 weeks later, they were fighting on the same battlefield and caring for each other and loving each other and helping each other. And the whole country was erupting in a sense of unity that I had never witnessed in my lifetime. And that power of our unity with our diversity is something we should maintain a consciousness of as we move forward. Never lose sight of that. That's the realization that I think we all need. We tend to think, he's religious, he's not religious, he's Haredi. This one, we put everybody into categories, and those divisions get maintained and worsened by those categories. And the realization is that, of course, we have differences. Of course, we need differences. That's how we clarify who we are in our truth, and that's how we bring a message to all of humanity that's totally different. So there's 70 facets to the Torah. There's 70 different dimensions of Am Yisrael. There's 70 nations. We have to bring together differences by understanding them and how they harmonize together. And with that realization, there's nothing that can stop us, because it's in our weakness. And we know even that Hamas watched this when they saw divisions. I don't know if you read about this. It was quite fascinating. When they monitor, of course, our media, and they saw these divisions, and they understood this is a time where the Jewish people are weak. They're so divided. And they said after the response of the unified response of Am Yisrael, after the attacks, they said it must have been a tactic that they used by the media to deceive us into thinking they were divided and weak. Do you get that?
Wow.
Because their media is, of course, controlled. So they couldn't imagine what they saw, so contradicted what they heard in the media. Obviously, it was a military tactic to think that they were divided. It's funny. But
wow. Okay. I want to move you, if you're good for time. I know we I think quite naturally what you're saying leads us to the third commandment, even the eighth commandment, right? Do not take God's name in vain. Do not steal, right? Do not steal any people's right to be different and to be themselves and to be right. That's part of human dignity. That's let them, don't steal someone's ability to bring to the party, to bring to the mission of Kal Yisrael their uniqueness and what they have. The struggle, to me, what's a challenge is focusing that all into this, what we're gonna call Kiddush Hashem, right? Don't take God's name in vain. Just the opposite. Sanctify God's name. Bring glory to God's name. That's God's name is. We said it on Rosh Hashanah many times, right? Your great and holy name is called upon us, called upon the Jewish people. In your mind, has there been any realization of that? And how do you see that maybe evolving or developing?
And first of all, we know that every Jew that's killed because he's a Jew is considered to be killed al Kiddush Hashem. It's a sanctification of God's name. Now, why is that? That's a little strange, right? Somebody's killed because he's a Jew. He could be a totally assimilated Jew, doesn't like the fact that he's a Jew, tries to get away from being a Jew, and yet if he's killed because of his Jew, it's a sanctification of God's name. So I think the basic explanation is every Jew, whether he likes it or not, carries this moral mission. And you see it when you scratch a Jew, you find an idealist. When you uncover that sense of the the moral fabric of Jews, not always aligned with Jewish values or our history or our Torah, but that sense of idealism that's at the root of every Jewish person is God planting in him this awareness, I need to make a better world. That's planted in the Jewish consciousness. Now, so someone who's killed because he's a Jew, so as we, as the basic message we started with, when they hate us because we're Jews, they're hating the moral mission that we stand for. So when someone's killed because he's a Jew, its evil is focused on what a Jew stands for. The Jewish people are here to bring this world to tikkun olam, to bring this world to its fulfillment. So that's why evil always turns to the Jew. That's the evil is threatened by the Jew and has to wipe out the Jew, even the Jew who's not necessarily consciously living with Kiddush Hashem, but his very existence is a testimony. As who was that? Tolstoy, one of the famous non-Jewish philosophers. When he was asked for proof of God, he said the Jewish people. The Jewish people's survival. The Jewish people are a testimony to God's reality. So Kiddush Hashem is not always a conscious act. When I was talking to my cousin in Toronto a few weeks after the war broke out, and I did a Zoom with my son who just got out of the army, he was on a break for his son's birth, and I did a Zoom event, and my cousin Stephen in Toronto was saying to my son Yoni, you should know you're not just fighting for Israel and your family, you're fighting for the whole Jewish people, you're fighting for me. And he said it with that sense of, I'm much more aware of myself being not only a Jew, but connected with Israel than ever before. A Jew whose consciousness of his relationship with Israel is awakened by this anti-Semitism, consciously and subconsciously, that's a Kiddush Hashem. He's awakening to his sense of identity as a Jew. That's Kiddush Hashem. A Jew in the diaspora, unfortunately, can disappear from Jewish history. But the anti-Semitism is coming to awaken him. No, you're not going to disappear. You're not in this generation. I'm going to remind you, not only you're a Jew, but you're a part of that nation over there. That's your home country. That's Israel. That's what you stand for. That's where your mission's going to be ultimately fulfilled, to be a light unto nations. You're a part of that. So wakening up to that awareness is a Kiddush Hashem. It says when the Jews were kicked out into the diaspora, that itself is a Chilul Hashem. The Navi says it. The prophet says a Chilul Hashem for Jews to be in the diaspora. What do you mean? God's not strong enough to keep his people in their home? That's the Holy Land. What do you mean Jews were kicked out? Right? Yirmiyahu says it's a Chilul Hashem that we're outside of Israel. So when a Jew awakens to his awareness that he's part of the Jewish nation and ultimately part of the Israeli nation, and Am Yisrael and Medinat Yisrael, that is a Kiddush Hashem. It's awakening to awareness of our purpose. That is Kiddush Hashem. Not to mention massive Kiddush Hashem that was going on everywhere in Israel and around the world. People giving money, people giving time, people coming on trips, people visiting, people praying for the hostages, people praying for the evacuees. That's Kiddush Hashem. That's an awareness that we are one people with one mission. We're one people with one heart. That's Kiddush Hashem. I remember, I think it was Dennis Prager spoke about this when Soviet Jewry was a cause and Jews were rallying all around the world for Soviet Jewry. So, Christians were also oppressed in Soviet Union. Why weren't there Christians? I mean, there were, but why not to the same extent that sense of national standing up for your people? Because ultimately the Jewish people feel when one part of our people is hurting, all of us are hurting. That's a Kiddush Hashem. That's a recognition of what we are as a people. When we feel the pain of each other and we stand up and we give to each other and we give our time and our money and we come and we support and we create these projects to make sure that we maintain our sense of commitment to each other, that is Kiddush Hashem in its most elevated form.
Thank you. And, and every Jew can do that. There's no Jew in the world that can't connect somehow. Well, thank you. I know in our conversations that you've mentioned the special realization, maybe, I don't know if I'm overusing the word, about Shabbat. Can you tell me more about that? How do you see Shabbat playing a role in taking our people forward and better, higher, stronger at this time?
Well, there were many stories, and one of them is this Sapir Cohen, young girl who, amazing story, how she wasn't feeling well a year ago, and she started this she online. She found this recommendation to say this the 27th Psalm, and it's a long story. But the thing that I'm mentioning is because in the end, people were asking her, are you religious now? She said, I'm not religious now, but I keep Shabbat. And she committed her boyfriend is still in captivity, and she committed at some point in her process to keep Shabbat. Now, not everybody's going to do that, and not everybody's who does it maybe will continue it, but the Shabbat has been, the famous statement, more than the Jew has kept the Shabbat has kept the Jewish people. Shabbat is not just a point in time. Shabbat is a state of awareness of two fundamental dimensions of Jewish life and Jewish consciousness. One is that we have a purpose in this world. We say once a week, we say God created the world for a purpose. That's a big deal. It's a very big deal to know that the world is for a purpose and we have a purpose in it. And we want to understand what our purpose is. The second is that he took us out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, to fulfill that purpose. And we got the Torah at Mount Sinai, the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai, as a expression of our freedom. They're called Al Tikra Charuta Luchot Ela Chiruta Luchot. The tablets don't describe them only as engraved on the tablets, but as freedom on the tablets. And Shabbat is in some ways the most basic part of our lives that reminds us that we're free. We're free from the slavery of being slaves to our work. We're free from being slaves to time. Today, we're free from being slaves to technology. And ultimately, we're given freedom in order to fulfill our purpose on this world, on earth. We need freedom for that. So we're taken out of Egypt. So Shabbat is a pillar of our lives. It's a central dimension of our identity. And so Shabbat, both as our expression of who we are and ultimately an expression of our message for all of humanity. Every human being is born with purpose, and every human being has the gift of freedom of choice. And we want to be bearers of the light of freedom for all of humanity. So one of the things that we came up with is that, lighting the Shabbat candles can be a reminder of the light to nations that we are supposed to bring to humanity. We're supposed to build a light unto nations that will provide that light for all of humanity, to have a relationship with purpose, with God, with freedom, with responsibility. And Shabbat is of the essence of that. And it's a time once a week. As I asked my grandchildren on Shabbat, I said, what's the most important Jewish holiday? This is on Rosh Hashanah. I'm asking them. They say, well, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Pesach. I said, no. Shabbat is the most important Jewish holiday. And one of the reasons for that is it's because it's the cornerstone of our identity, a reminder of who we are. And in that regard, Shabbat represents a powerful vehicle for change. So the light of Shabbat carries with it the mission of the Jewish people to become a nation that brings light to the world, light unto the nations. Ultimately, feels like you permit me to say it, every Jew can do it wherever he is, but we want to build a society that lives with that light in Israel, that brings this message and demonstrates what a society can bring a society of light, especially in this war of light versus darkness. We need to fulfill our mission as a people to conquer darkness with our light. So lighting candles on Shabbat can be a reminder that we're committed to that light, committed to the moral light that the Almighty's entrusted us with, and that right now we're fighting desperately for ourselves and for all of humanity to overcome the darkness that is seeking to engulf all of civilization.
Very powerful. Okay, I think we how many did we cover? We did, and I am the Lord your God. Do not have any other gods. Don't take God's name in vain. Shabbat. Oh, honoring parents. Let's touch on honoring parents. What does that lens? How does that lens help us make sense? Take us forward from where we are.
You know, the event that we were supposed to do right now, we had a film and we weren't able to go ahead with the film because this young man who had set up the whole film and the infrastructure with his company, he was called to Lebanon last week, and he's got a very important role in the current combat that's going on in Lebanon. He's got an important position in the army. I won't go into it, and we haven't been able to be in contact with him, and because of that, we weren't able to promise that we could go ahead with the event. An hour and a half ago, his mother saw a phone. She received a phone call from a non-identified number, and she answered it, and it was her son on a what do you call those, like an army phone, the non-identifiable phone number. And he called her to tell her, I'm okay. She's hearing everything that's going on. She's got 3 children, a son-in-law, and 3 sons in the army right now, in different places and whatever. But he felt he's got to tell his mother he's okay. She's reading the news. Mom, I'm okay. Ima, I just wanted to tell you I'm okay. He sounded awful. I heard from Matanya he sounded terrible, but he wanted to tell his mother, I'm okay. That instinct of kibbud av aim, of honoring your parents in all of these dimensions of this war, carry a consciousness that we come from someplace and we're going to someplace. We carry the strength of honoring our parents all the way back to Avram and Sarah, because we know we're part of this legacy of the Jewish people that's carrying the destiny of the Jewish people forward. So in this war, every soldier is fighting for his generations of Jews who came before him and gave him this mission now. And he knows when he's on that front line that he's carrying the prayers, he's carrying the dreams of the whole Jewish people today and all the generations going back. That's kibbud av aim. He's honoring his past by fighting for the future. And he knows that when the Jewish people stand together at this moment in history with a sense of history and destiny and commitment to that covenant that we're still carrying, he's fulfilling that mission of honoring his past, honoring his parents, his grandparents, all the way back. And we all do that, whether we're soldiers or non-soldiers. I think about my grandmother, my grandparents every day who survived the Holocaust, lost their families and managed to survive. And here I am in Israel because of their prayers and their commitment and what they gave me. I'm not just doing it, and I'm giving it to my grandchildren and teaching them about their great-grandparents. It's all this shasheret hadarot, we call it in Hebrew. It's the legacy of the chain of generations. And we know, especially at times like this, that we're not alone. We carry the prayers of all of those people who gave their lives to give us this opportunity to have our place in Jewish history. And we should make these choices for the generations that come in light of what we've been given and the mission that we carry.
To my mother, definitely straight after October the 7th, but throughout this year, it's constantly something, tells me, your father your father would go mad. Your father would go crazy watching the news. He wouldn't be able to watch it. Such a reminder of I love what you're doing for me is, that's where I come from. And my father he would break down crying watching the news today. Not a year ago. Today he'd be writing to the president. Today. That's powerful. Yeah. It's a sense of mission, it's a sense of power. Um, okay. Well, the Midrash says that the Jewish people got the first, according to one Midrash, they got the Ten Commandments after two. They were like, that's overwhelming, Moshe. You speak to, you got to hold on to all of them. It's a lot. Okay, do not murder. We did. Do not commit adultery. Do not commit adultery. What does that? We're looking through that lens.
I heard a podcast of a young woman, 34 years old. She was talking about the first days of the war. She actually has a high position in intelligence in the army, and she just had her first baby 2 months before. She's a young mother, and her husband and her are both called up to the army. She's nursing her baby, and she decided together with her husband, obviously he's going to go and I'm going to stay with the baby. Okay. She stays. She starts a couple months into the war. She's speaking to other mothers in that situation. They're called, wives of reservists, which we have in our family, and every family in Israel has wives who are home taking care of the family. If their husbands, in some cases, the husbands are home, but in most cases, it's the husbands are in fighting and the women are at home taking care of family. And she said she started a WhatsApp group it started with 5, 25, became very quickly 1,000, 10,000 people in her WhatsApp group, 10,000 women discussing what their needs are in this situation. And she developed a policy. She had a background in developing policy. She was trained in the Army's intelligence. She put together a proposal and sent it to the Treasury Minister and got approval for 12 billion shekel. I think that's the number, to get support for these women in this situation, to help their needs. Now, that sense of holding a family together, a sense of loyalty to your family in a time of need, that's what comes to my mind. Holding the family together is a priority of Jews. It's a priority of Israel. It's a commitment of every Jewish mother, every Jewish father, to create a family that has the commitment and the safety and the ability to provide for that continuity of marriage and family that is the basis of our continuity. So, it's not exactly the adultery, but it's the centrality of a strong marriage as the basis of Jewish mission. And Baruch Hashem, we see that everywhere we look. It's been very hard, very stressful, very demanding for all of these families, and they need support, both financial, emotional, and otherwise. But the value, the commitment, and the wisdom to do that is there.
I think it's exactly what what do not commit adultery means. Loyalty. And loyalty, we know, is when it's tested. And what a testimony, what an unbelievable story. That's what they're doing. I got married to create a family. Do to do what you got to do, to hold it together. It's overcoming some of the hardest challenges. Okay, I think we're down to the to the last one. Um, we really haven't touched on, even though when we teach, we always start with lo tachmod, don't covet. Don't covet. How does don't covet? I mean, just listening to you going through this, it really is. It's our basis. These are our foundation stones. This is, of course, this is how we look at the world. This is who we are. How do you, when you put on the glasses of don't covet, lo tachmod, what do you see?
We know that there's a positive expression of each of the 10 commandments, right? There's what not to do. And then in the case of don't covet, what comes to mind is Israel is called Eretz Chemda Tovar Chava. We say it in our benching. We say it, the Torah speaks about it. It's called the beloved land. It's the coveted land. Israel is a land that we're supposed to covet. Covet means we hold it so dear to us that we protect it. Something that you covet means it's yours. You feel completely engaged with your identity that this is yours. And that's the most important expression of the positive aspect of covet. It says a spouse should covet his wife. You're supposed to covet your wife, not don't covet the other guy's wife, but covet your wife. Know how precious she is to you. Know how precious your husband is to you. That coveting, positive expression, coveting means, yes, this is me. This is what I. So the land of Israel, if every Jew would take the 10th commandment and feel a sense of covetous ownership, a sense of protecting that which is precious, that's been given to us as our homeland, as our legacy, and know that that's where he can go and ultimately want to go. That chemda, that sense of desire for the land, can also transform the Jewish people. They're attacking my land. They want my land. This is my land. This is my country. This is who we are. This is what we've been given by God. We've been given by the world. We have a right to be there. We have an obligation to be there, an obligation to be ourselves. That sense of relationship, deep relationship of feeling what's precious is mine. This is my land. That can transform the Jewish people. Part of the realignment that I see from this war is that Jews around the world will think differently about Israel. Obviously, there are many Jews that already have this, but unfortunately, not every Jew has that. And this awakens the Jewish people to our relationship to our precious land called Israel, and to feel what a blessing that we have over 7 million Jews here. We have such a strong country and such a strong economy. We have an army, and we have a thriving society with an unbelievable culture, an unbelievable sense of purpose. Even if it's not clear what that purpose is, but there's a purpose that Israelis feel. We are here. This is us. This is our land. This is our country. We're going to make it work. Ultimately, to refine that purpose, to fulfill all the 10 commandments. But I'm saying that sense of precious ownership, of feeling that this is something that belongs to me, it's been given to me, I love it deeply, and to feel that connection that comes from that place, that's the fulfillment of the 10th commandment at this time especially. Especially this Hamas says it's their land. They're saying they own it. Iran just said, I'm going to wipe out the state of Israel completely. You're going to wipe out my precious land? You, Iranian president? Who do you think you are? God gave us this land. That sense of violation that comes when someone takes something that is truly precious to you, that should bring about a deeper love, a deeper connection, and much deeper relationship for every Jew to this country, and ultimately bring us home to fulfill our mission here. As many as they can at the right time, but that we should feel that that's what we should be heading.
Amen.
I just want to mention that it should be a zchut of what we did tonight for the protection of all the soldiers who are in battle in Lebanon now, especially Hanan Moshe and Orit Aryeh, and all of us who are in a very precarious situation now. That should be a zchut. We should have bitachon. We should have confidence and trust, and feel that we're going through this time together. And we'll let you know when the film is going to be shown again. Bezrat Hashem. We're thinking of the 27th. We're thinking maybe the day after the Chagim, maybe the day after Simchat Torah. It's a Sunday. We'll speak with it. But that's my latest thought, is to do it in 3 weeks from tonight. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Shalom, just before you leave, I just want to thank you. I know this was very impromptu. We got 3 blessed people here on the Zoom with us, but I've recorded it. I'm going to put it on YouTube. This is something I think will be of amazing benefit to so many Jews around the world. I just want to thank you for being so sincere, but the words I'm looking at, so much more than that, being able to really share your neshama with us. Most of us are really scared about doing that, but it's amazing to just come into contact with yours and to imbibe and to really be enlightened with its light. And may you be blessed really with so much koyach. And we're just at the beginning, Rav Shalom. We're just at the beginning. Thank you.
Lots of blessing from Yerushalayim to all of you.
God bless. Thank you.